People always say danger hides in dark alleys. But the real danger, I learned, can be the smiling face that lives one door down. I was about to discover that the person I trusted most in my building was quietly engineering a betrayal that would shake every part of my life. What do you do when the friend who waters your plants, borrows your sugar, and laughs at your jokes turns out to be plotting against you? Before I go any further, drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how many of you have met a neighbor who seemed perfect until the mask slipped. 25 years back, when I was just 32 years old, my life looked picture perfect from the outside. My name is Clara Whitmore, and back then I had the kind of quiet routine people envy: a cozy apartment overlooking a leafy street, a steady job at a small publishing house, and a circle of neighbors who waved each morning as we passed in the hallway. When Melanie Hart, a new tenant in her late 20s, moved into the apartment next to mine, it felt like the universe had sent me a gift. She was warm, quick to laugh, and effortlessly stylish. The kind of woman who could throw on an old sweater and still look like she belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. From the start, Melanie and I shared small rituals: Sunday coffee on my balcony, evening walks through the courtyard after work. We traded books, swapped recipes, and offered each other advice on everything from wardrobe choices to workplace politics. I remember thinking, finally, a real friend in this building. It's funny how loneliness can make you welcome someone without asking enough questions. Looking back, the red flags weren't hard to see. Melanie was curious, too curious about my finances, my dating life, even the lock on my storage unit in the basement. She'd casually ask, "Do you ever worry about someone breaking into your locker? You your spare keys in there, right?" At the time, I chalked it up to nervousness. She was new to the city, after all. But late at night, when I replayed those conversations, something always felt slightly off. Then there was the incident with my package. I'd ordered a rare first edition novel for a client's birthday. When it went missing from the lobby, Melanie appeared at my door the next morning holding the unopened box. "Found this sitting by the elevator," she said, smiling like a hero. I thanked her, of course, but a sliver of doubt settled in my stomach. How had she known it was mine? No name was visible on the side she held facing me. If you've ever ignored that quiet inner alarm because you didn't want to seem rude or suspicious, you already know how I felt. It's easier to believe in friendship than to confront the possibility of betrayal. The turning point came during the building's annual spring gathering. Residents filled the courtyard with food, music, and wine. I'd invited a colleague, Simon Gray, to join me, a gentle, observant man from my office. While I was in the kitchen replenishing drinks, Simon overheard Melanie talking to two strangers near the garden wall. According to Simon, she introduced herself as the caretaker of my apartment, boasting that she had a spare key and handled things when I was away. She even described my work schedule in unsettling detail. Simon pulled me aside. "Clara," he whispered, "why does your neighbor think she has keys to your place?" I felt the ground tilt. I'd never given Melanie a key, only allowed her to water my plants once when I was home late. Had she made a copy? That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every conversation we'd ever had, every time she'd lingered near my door. By morning, I decided to test a theory. Before leaving for work, I placed a single strand of hair across the inside edge of my apartment door and a tiny strip of clear tape over the keyhole, both nearly invisible to a casual glance. When I returned that evening, the hair was gone and the tape slightly peeled back. My heart pounded. Someone had entered while I was away, and only one person had shown that much interest in my schedule. The betrayal wasn't dramatic. No smashed windows, no stolen jewelry, just the slow, calculated violation of trust by someone I'd welcomed into my life. I realized Melanie wasn't simply curious. She was mapping my habits, testing my boundaries, preparing for something I couldn't yet name. And if I confronted her too soon, I might lose my only chance to prove it. I decided to stay silent and plan carefully. If she was bold enough to enter once, she would try again. The question wasn't if, it was when. I purchased a discreet motion-activated camera and hid it behind a row of books on my living room shelf. I also left a small jewelry box on the coffee table, a decoy containing nothing but costume pieces. Then I waited. Days passed. Each evening I returned home to find everything seemingly untouched, though the camera's green light assured me it was recording. On the 5th day, I checked the footage. There she was, Melanie, slipping inside with a duplicate key, moving with the casual confidence of someone who believed she belonged. She went straight to the coffee table, opened the jewelry box, and smiled. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just nosiness. It was theft, carefully rehearsed. I copied the footage to a secure drive and sat in silence, heart hammering as the reality sank in. The woman who shared coffee with me every Sunday, Wabe, who laughed at my jokes and borrowed my favorite books, was preparing to rob me. I didn't call the police that night. Not yet. I knew that if I moved too soon, she could claim misunderstanding or even accuse me of spying. I needed a plan that left no room for excuses. What Melanie didn't know was that her quiet intrusion had awakened something in me, a determination to protect not just my belongings, but the dignity she thought she could steal. The next move would be mine, and it would be silent, deliberate, and devastating. The night I confirmed the break-in, I barely slept. Every creak of the building sounded like an echo of betrayal. By morning, my fear had hardened into a cold, deliberate resolve. Melanie thought she was invisible, but she had underestimated the quiet patience of someone who values proof over panic. Revenge doesn't start with anger. It starts with evidence and the discipline to let a thief believe she's winning. I already had one recording of her slipping into my apartment. Now I needed to build a case so airtight that even the smoothest liar couldn't wriggle free. How do you catch someone who believes they're smarter than you without letting them know you're watching every move? The first step was reinforcing my security without tipping her off. I contacted a locksmith recommended by a colleague, someone discreet, and had a second, internal deadbolt installed that could only be locked from inside. From the outside, the door looked unchanged. I kept the original lock operational, so Melanie's copied key would still turn as usual. Next, I set up additional hidden cameras, one inside the hallway ceiling vent and another disguised as a smoke detector in the living room. Each recorded to a cloud account she couldn't possibly access. I also purchased motion sensors for the windows and balcony door, programming them to send silent alerts to my phone. By the end of the week, my apartment was a quiet fortress, but one designed to invite, not repel. 3 nights later, the alert buzzed on my phone at 10:37 p.m. I was sitting in a cafe across the street, sipping tea with trembling hands. Through the live feed, I watched Melanie glide into my living room like she owned it. This time, she moved faster. straight to the decoy jewelry box, which she pocketed without hesitation. Then she wandered toward my bedroom, opening drawers and photographing documents with her phone. When she finally left, my apartment door clicked shut with the same casual grace she always displayed when leaving our Sunday coffees. I stared at the footage, a mixture of disgust and admiration swirling in my chest. She wasn't just stealing objects. She was stealing intimacy, the right to feel safe in my own home. Anyone who's ever been betrayed by a friend knows the strangest part isn't the crime itself. It's the realization that the shared laughter, the small kindnesses, were part of a performance. My next move required careful selection of allies. Going to the building management first would be risky. Melanie's charm had already won them over. Instead, I approached Simon, the colleague Wallow, who had overheard her bragging at the party. We met at a quiet diner outside the neighborhood. I slid my phone across the table, showing him the footage. His jaw tightened as he watched. "This is incredible," he said. "You need to take this to the police." "Not yet," I replied. "I want her caught with something undeniable. One visit isn't enough. She could claim confusion or say I gave her permission." Simon hesitated but nodded. "Then what's the plan?" "Patience," I said. "She'll come back. Greed always does." To tempt her, I created a new bait. I filled a small fireproof box with documents printed to look like high-value savings bonds and property deeds. Inside, I placed a single real item, a signed check for a modest amount, just enough to prove the papers weren't mere props. The box went into my bedroom closet, positioned for easy discovery. I also left a single window slightly unlatched, not enough to be obvious, but just enough to suggest carelessness. If Melanie noticed, it would feel like an invitation. It came sooner than expected. 2 nights later, at 2:14 a.m., my phone vibrated with a silent alert. I was again at the cafe, nerves buzzing like live wires. Through the hidden cameras, I watched her slip inside wearing gloves and a black hoodie. She moved with the efficiency of practice, heading straight to the closet. When she discovered the fireproof box, her eyes lit up like a child spotting a birthday cake. She placed it in a large tote and hurried out, unaware that every movement was captured from 3 different angles. I waited 5 minutes, then crossed the street and entered my apartment. The air smelled faintly of her perfume, a soft floral scent that now felt like poison. I locked the internal deadbolt and transferred the recordings to multiple backups. With 2 break-ins documented and stolen property in her possession, I finally had enough to involve the authorities. But I wanted to ensure that when the confrontation came, it would leave no room for manipulation. The next morning, I called Detective Alan Pierce, a trusted contact from a neighborhood safety seminar I'd attended years earlier. I explained the situation, sent him the footage, and invited him to inspect the apartment. After reviewing the videos, Pierce leaned back in his chair. "This is textbook," he said. "Do you want us to arrest her immediately?" "Not yet," I replied. "I want to see where she keeps the stolen items first. Can you get a warrant based on this?" He smiled faintly. "With evidence this clear, absolutely. Give us a day to set it up." The following evening, I watched from an unmarked car as 2 plainclothes officers positioned themselves near Melanie's door. Simon sat beside me, eyes fixed on the building entrance. At precisely 9:06 p.m., Melanie appeared in the hallway carrying the same tote bag she'd used during the break-ins. The officers approached calmly, identifying themselves and requesting to speak with her inside the apartment. She tried to charm them, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, but her confidence faltered when they presented the warrant. Inside her unit, the officers found my decoy jewelry box, the fake financial documents, and even the small check I had planted. Every item neatly stacked in a drawer, as if she were cataloguing trophies. When they led her past the car where Simon and I waited, she caught my eye. For the first time since we met, her smile was gone. Later that night, Detective Pierce called to confirm that Melanie had confessed to duplicating my key after noticing the brand and model of my lock. She admitted to making multiple entries and planned to sell some of the stolen goods online. Hearing the cons, confession should have brought relief, but instead I felt a strange, hollow ache. The friendship we'd shared, though false, had still been real in the moments we laughed and drank coffee together. The betrayal didn't erase those memories. It simply poisoned them. It's unsettling to realize that someone can share your daily life, memorize your routines, and still view you as prey. But betrayal, I've learned, isn't about you. It's about the emptiness inside the betrayer. Although the police had her in custody, I wasn't finished. Legal consequences were important, but I wanted a resolution that left no doubt in the minds of our neighbours, the same people who had once admired her charm. Detective Pierce assured me the building's management would receive a full report, but he also agreed to let me address the residents during the upcoming tenants' meeting once the legal paperwork was complete. "Your story could help others stay alert," he said. The idea resonated. I didn't want quiet whispers in hallways or half-truths passed from door to door. I wanted clarity. I wanted every person who had waved to her in the courtyard to understand exactly who she was. In the days leading up to the meeting, I organized the video clips into a concise presentation. No sensational editing, just raw facts, timestamps, footage of her entering with the copied key, images of the stolen items in her apartment. As I rehearsed my remarks, I felt the old fear ebbing away. Each click of the play button replaced anxiety with authority. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about reclaiming the safety she had tried to steal. The night of the tenants' meeting arrived with a cold drizzle that slicked the courtyard bricks. Residents filed into the common room, chattering softly as they shook off umbrellas. I took a seat near the front, laptop in hand, heart pounding with a mixture of dread and anticipation. When the building manager announced that a serious matter required discussion, a hush settled over the room. Detective Pierce introduced himself, then gestured toward me. "This is the resident who first brought this to our attention," he said. "She'll explain what's been happening." All eyes turned toward me. For a moment, the weight of every stolen minute, every false smile, pressed against my chest. Then I opened the laptop, pressed play, and let the truth speak for itself. The first clip, Melanie unlocking my door with the copied key, drew a collective gasp. Gasps turned to murmurs as the second and third clips played, each more damning than the last. By the final frame, silence filled the room like a held breath. I closed the laptop. "She pretended to be my friend," I said evenly. "But friendship isn't a disguise for theft. It's trust. And trust, once broken, deserves light, not darkness." When the meeting ended, neighbors approached with apologies, questions, and promises of support. Some admitted they'd noticed small inconsistencies in her stories, but hadn't wanted to seem suspicious. Their regret was palpable, but I felt no bitterness, only the steady calm of someone who has finally reclaimed control. Melanie remained in police custody, awaiting formal charges. But for me, the real victory wasn't the legal process. It was the look on every neighbour's face as they realised that danger had been living just a few feet away, disguised as charm. And this was only the beginning. The true reckoning, the part she never saw coming, was still ahead. The morning after the rooftop confrontation, I went okay to a flood of notifications, messages from colleagues, former friends, and even strangers who had seen the viral clip. The video of Brandon's public unravelling was spreading like wildfire, gathering thousands of comments overnight. Most people didn't know the full story, but the footage of a smug man cracking under pressure was enough to ignite public curiosity. Who was the woman who exposed him? What was the secret deal he'd tried to hide? The internet began doing what it does best: digging. Inside my small apartment, sunlight filtered through half-drawn curtains as I scrolled through endless threads. People were identifying details of Brandon's shady real estate deals, connecting his name to shell companies, and even pulling old news clippings about zoning violations. I had started a storm that now had a life of its own. But viral fame wasn't my goal. My real target was the board of directors, the very people who once smiled at me in meetings while quietly plotting to erase my years of work. I needed them to feel pressure from every direction: public outrage, shareholder panic, and most importantly, undeniable evidence of fraud. That morning, I finalized the package I'd been assembling for months. It contained carefully organized emails, signed documents, and recorded conversations that detailed Brandon's financial manipulation. Each file was cross-referenced, each accusation backed by hard proof. I sent it to a trusted investigative journalist under one condition: wait for my signal before publishing. Next, I called an emergency meeting with the board. My voice on the phone was calm, but inside I felt the electric hum of victory. "This is urgent," I told them. "If you don't meet with me within 48 hours, you'll regret it." By the time the call ended, they had agreed to a closed-door session in the company's downtown headquarters. 2 days later, I walked into the gleaming glass building that once felt like home. The lobby smelled faintly of expensive polish, and the familiar echo of heels on marble triggered a surge of memories: late nights preparing presentations, the thrill of landing contracts, the sting of Brandon's betrayal. The boardroom was already filled when I entered. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some wary, some openly hostile. Brandon sat at the far end of the table, his complexion pale and his jaw tight. I placed a thick folder on the table and remained standing. "Before we begin," I said, "I want it on record that this meeting is being documented. You all know why we're here. Brandon's fraudulent transfers, his misuse of company funds, and his attempt to silence me are no longer secrets. I have proof of everything, and I've already shared copies with outside counsel." A murmur rippled across the room. One board member, an older man with a sharp suit and sharper tongue, leaned forward. "These are serious accusations, Ms. Angela. Are you prepared for the legal consequences of making them?" I met his gaze without flinching. "Absolutely. Are you prepared for the consequences of ignoring them?" The room went silent. Brandon shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming nervously against the table. I pulled out a printed spreadsheet and slid it toward the center. "These numbers represent unauthorized transfers totaling over $7 million. Here are the signatures approving each one. Brandon's signatures. Here are the shell companies those funds were funneled into. And here I tapped another page, are the property records proving he personally profited. Gasps broke the tension like small explosions. Brandon finally spoke, his voice cracking. This is a misunderstanding. Those transfers were strategic investments. Stop, I cut in. I have emails where you brag about using company money to buy private property. I have voice recordings where you threaten to ruin my career if I spoke out. You can try to spin this, but the evidence speaks louder than you ever could. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. Then the board chair cleared her throat. Brandon, step outside. He sputtered in protest, but 2 security officers appeared at the door and escorted him out. The chair turned to me. Ms. Angela, please leave your documents. The board will review this immediately. I gathered my bag but left the thick folder where it lay, a silent bomb ready to detonate. Outside the building, a crisp wind cut through the midday sun. I felt strangely weightless, as if years of anger and fear were finally lifting from my shoulders. But this wasn't over. Brandon was cunning, and cornered men are dangerous. That evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered cautiously. You think you've won? Brandon's voice hissed through the speaker. You don't know who you're dealing with. I'll burn this company to the ground before I let you take it from me. I didn't respond. Instead, I recorded the call and saved it to 3 different backups. Minutes later, another text arrived. This one from the journalist I'd contacted. Is it time? I stared at the glowing screen. The board now had my evidence. The public already sensed blood. If I gave the signal, the story would break across every major outlet within hours. Brandon would be finished. But part of me hesitated, not because I pitied him, those days were long gone, but because I wanted the board to feel the full weight of their own choice. Would they protect a fraud to save face, or would they finally do the right thing? I typed back a single word. Wait. The next morning, I received an encrypted email from an anonymous source inside the boardroom. Attached was a draft statement announcing Brandon's immediate removal as CEO, pending a full audit of company finances. The board had chosen survival over loyalty. I allowed myself a slow, satisfied smile. Still, I didn't trust them completely. Powerful people are experts at burying scandals. So I forwarded the statement to the journalist along with a new message. If they fail to release this publicly within 48 hours, publish everything. The reply came within seconds. Understood. For the next 2 days, I waited. Each hour felt like a taut wire ready to snap. I kept a low profile, avoiding calls and staying indoors, knowing Brandon might try something desperate. On the second evening, the company's official press release went live. Effective immediately, Brandon Keller has been terminated for financial misconduct. An independent investigation is underway to ensure full transparency. The words glowed on my laptop screen like a victory banner. My heart pounded, not with anxiety this time, but with the sharp, clean thrill of triumph. But victory, I reminded myself, is rarely final. Brandon still controlled hidden accounts. The board would attempt to shield their own complicity. And I had one final move to make, one that would ensure my years of sacrifice weren't just revenge, but transformation. The PLs, an I had guarded in silence for 2 decades, was finally within reach. And when the world learned the full truth, no one, not even me, would ever see Angela Martinez the same way again. The morning after the board's press release, I awoke to a new reality. News outlets were ablaze with headlines about Brandon Keller's termination and the multi-million-dollar fraud investigation. Shareholders demanded answers. Employees whispered in break rooms, their fear mingling with relief. The empire Brandon once ruled was now a fortress of panic. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the chaos. For years I had imagined this day, wondering if the world would ever know what he had done. Now the truth wasn't just known, it was unavoidable. Yet, as satisfying as it felt, I sensed that the battle wasn't over. Brandon was cornered, but a cornered predator can still lash out. Sure enough, by late afternoon my attorney forwarded a notice. Brandon had filed a defamation claim against me personally. It was a desperate move, designed to intimidate. "Don't worry," my lawyer said over the phone. "This is smoke, not fire. He's trying to scare you into silence." But I wasn't frightened. I had anticipated every move, every trick. My evidence wasn't just airtight, it was explosive. That evening, I opened a secure folder on my laptop labeled Phoenix. Inside were documents I'd collected over 2 decades. Offshore account statements, forged approvals, private texts Brandon once sent when he believed I was loyal. They painted a picture far darker than the board or the media had yet seen. I composed a final email to the investigative journalist who had been waiting for my signal since the rooftop confrontation. "Release everything, tonight." Within hours, the first exposé went live. Unlike the board's carefully worded press release, this report spared no one. It detailed the shell companies, the property flips, the falsified audits, and the hush money payments Brandon had made to keep whistleblowers quiet. The story included audio of his late-night threats, his own voice promising to burn the company down. The reaction was immediate and brutal. By sunrise, federal investigators had announced a full criminal probe. Brandon's defamation suit evaporated like mist in the sun. He vanished from public view, leaving only rumors of frantic lawyers and frozen bank accounts. While the world dissected Brandon's downfall, I prepared my own next chapter. Revenge alone was never the goal. My plan was always about more than punishment. It was about transformation. Years earlier, while quietly gathering evidence, I'd been building something of my own, a logistics startup focused on sustainable shipping. I'd invested my savings, hired a small but brilliant team, and waited for the right moment to scale. That moment had arrived. With Brandon gone and the board desperate to stabilize their collapsing empire, I made my move. Through a series of strategic negotiations, each one backed by public pressure and my untouchable credibility, I acquired key contracts and infrastructure from the very company that had betrayed me. They needed a savior. I offered them a lifeline on my terms. The irony was delicious. The people who once plotted to erase me were now signing deals that ensured my success. My startup grew overnight, rebranded as Novatrans Global, a name that symbolized rebirth. Investors who had once doubted me lined up to participate. Journalists hailed me as the woman who turned betrayal into a billion-dollar empire. Yet amid the whirlwind of meetings and celebrations, I kept one promise to myself. I would never become what I fought against. Every employee received fair contracts. Environmental standards were non-negotiable. Transparency was built into every layer of the business. My victory would not be poisoned by the same greed that destroyed Brandon. Several months later, I received an unexpected envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name in bold handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, creased and smudged. "Angela," it read, "you won. But remember, even predators can be prey." B. No threats, no pleas, just a cryptic reminder that power always comes with a price. I read it twice, then fed it into the shredder. Brandon's words no longer carried weight. His empire was gone, his reputation dust. Whatever games he still wanted to play, they would unfold far away from the world I'd built. That night, I stood on the balcony of my new office, overlooking the city skyline. The air was crisp, filled with the hum of life and the glow of opportunity. For the first time in years, I felt completely free from fear, from the shadows of betrayal, from the endless calculations of survival. I thought back to the woman I had been 20 years earlier, a 34-year-old executive blindsided by the man she trusted most. She had walked out of a boardroom with nothing but a box of personal items and a heart full of fury. That woman had quietly gathered proof, endured sleepless nights, and plotted a path that no one could see. And now, standing atop my own thriving company, I whispered a quiet truth to the wind. Justice isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about staying silent until silence is impossible. The press continued to cover Brandon's downfall for months. He faced criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction. His assets were frozen, his allies scattered. Occasionally, reporters tried to link me directly to his prosecution, but I remained careful in my public statements. My role was clear but controlled. I had provided evidence, not vengeance. Privately, though, I allowed myself a single indulgence. I kept a framed photo of the original company's headquarters on my office wall, a reminder of where I started and how far I had come. Beneath the photo, in small engraved letters, a single phrase read, "The quiet game always wins." 1 year later, Novatrans Global surpassed every revenue projection. Our fleet of eco-friendly trucks and smart routing technology dominated the industry. Competitors scrambled to imitate our model, but none could match the trust we inspired. Clients signed with us not just for efficiency, but for integrity, a currency more valuable than any stock. At the company's first anniversary gala, I took the stage to address my team. As I looked out at the sea of determined faces, I felt the final piece of my revenge click into place. This wasn't about Brandon anymore. It was about the people who believed in me, the mission we shared, and the future we were building. My story, I told them, began with betrayal. But betrayal is just the spark. What you build from that fire, that's where the real victory lies. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the distance, Brandon Keller's name faded further into irrelevance. That night, as I left the gala and stepped into the cool evening air, I realized the war was truly over. Not because Brandon had been destroyed, but because I no longer needed his downfall to define my success. My life was no longer a reaction to his actions. It was my own creation, powerful, purposeful, and untouchable. I walked away from the lights, my heels clicking against the pavement, carrying nothing but the weightless certainty of a woman who had not only survived, but transformed. Angela Martinez had once been a betrayed executive. Now she was a legend,